Hello, I am Ryan Staley, the founder and CEO of Whale Boss, and currently I'm helping companies enable their revenue teams for 2xing their output specifically with AI. So I'm excited to talk with you about this today, Phil.
All right. And what's the best or the worst advice you ever got, Ryan?
So it's such a great question, man. I think the uh, the worst advice I've probably gotten is just put your head down and just keep working and just build yourself up through the same organization. That's probably the worst advice I've gotten because things are changing so fast right now at such an incredible rate. If you do that, you are going to miss an exponential amount of opportunities that can come up that can accelerate you 2, 3, 4, 10x.
Wow. So who gave you that advice in your career? Where were you? And what do you remember? Like the first person that told you, put your head down and just work.
I mean, well, it's a pattern, man. And it wasn't just one person, it was multiple leaders that you work for, which is kind of like, and there's more to it than that. It's not just like, just put your head down and work. It's just like, just put in your time, right? You got to put in your time. A lot of times you have to be at organizations for a long time to get to where you want. And so I think like there's some truth in what's said there, right? Where you do have to put in the effort and you do have to put in the hard work to become the person that you want to be first before you could do the things that you want to do. However, I think that's over exemplified specifically in the revenue organizations that I've worked for, because there's a lot of times where what I was done was understated, or what the opportunities available outside the company were, that I didn't look at. And so as a result of it, I just focused dead on networking with my customers and networking in my organization, not networking with peers and folks that were higher than me. So that's something that if I had to go back in a time machine, I would have done, because a lot of opportunities come from byproducts of who you know and right timing with that. And so that's one of the things I would have tweaked or changed.
Ooh, I like that. Well, before we talk about AI, let's go a little deeper on that, because I think that's a great opportunity for reps to get more experience, and that is to network up in a network kind of sideways as well. So how do we network up to our boss, Ryan, without sucking up?
Well, you could easily network up to your boss during your rap sessions, depending on how you show up and the questions you ask for self-development, but then also augmenting what their goals and KPIs and aspirations are, right? So I think that's one way to do it. What I'm talking about more so is externally to other organizations.
Oh, okay.
Like for example, like one of the things that I did is I grew a business group from 0 to 30 million in ARR in 5.5 years with 4 salespeople, right? We didn't have any marketing, we didn't have any SDRs. And at the time, I just thought that's what you do, right? Like I didn't know that that was anything exceptional. I thought that was just a normal track record of what's to happen. And a big reason for that is like my identity of what I did at work was identified around the experience that I had, which was the company that I worked at, right? And so sometimes like if you don't have that external perspective, you don't understand truly what the value is of what you've either done or what you can do. And so it's good just for having different perspectives on that, because like literally if you are a revenue, if you're in sales, if you're a revenue leader, if you're a revenue VP or CRO, like those are literally some of the hardest jobs in the world that are the most demanding, that always expect performance. And so having that external perspective is so critical to developing yourself as a person, and then like what's possible with where you can go with your career and what you're doing.
Great advice. Great advice. Okay. So with that, let's talk about AI. Like AI is not something every organization is leveraging, but I'm sure they're all talking about it because you can't help but get it. So define AI for sales enablement as through the work that you do, Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm still trying to come up, like this is a new category, right? So it's like I'm still trying to come up with the exact definition for it or the term, right? But like AI for sales enablement, AI for skill enablement. And so most folks, like if you look at 2023 was the year of companies focusing on integrating AI into their product, right? There was like a massive gold rush to make that happen. And new companies were created at a faster speed than ever before, because the cost to create software and tools basically went down to a very, very low cost, right? And so as a byproduct of that, we have all these amazing new tools that have come out. And I kind of equate it to the Industrial Revolution, right? So when we first had the Industrial Revolution, we went from like digging ditches to having machines that dug ditches, right, for us, and we operated those machines. So now fast forward in 2024, what's kind of happening now is we have all these different tools that we're doing manual work for that are different SaaS tools or tech tools or even job components in white collar work. And effectively, we're operating like we did in the pre-industrial revolution, where we're doing everything manually, right? Now, what we're able to do is, because of the demonetization of AI, effectively, now we have the ability to, just like we did when we make the transformation from digging the ditches and doing all the work manually ourselves, we now have the opportunity to change from doing that with tools to leveraging and having tools do that for us at scale and really basically scaling humans. And so it's a unique opportunity in time because this is happening faster than any other change when we look at it, whether it be the internet, the personal computer, mobile, or social. This is happening faster than before. And the scope of change or the depth of change is even deeper than we've ever experienced. So it's a really unique in time opportunity where basically, if you are enabled with what you're doing from a skills perspective, let's just talk about sales, and you're integrating AI into everything that you do, you will literally 2x the output, at least, of someone that's in the same situation at the same skill set. So as you can imagine, there's going to be massive winners and losers when it comes to this, not just in terms of career and profession, but in terms of company and scale. And Sam Altman even identified the other day, he thinks that there's eventually going to be a one-person, $1 billion company that's created from the use of AI, which is just mind-boggling if you think about it.
Wow. A one-person, $1 billion company. Yeah. That's amazing. That would be something. So let's scale that down a little bit here, and let's talk about practical, tactical stuff that our sales folks can do here. Everybody knows about the opportunity to have the AI help you rewrite an email sequence or help you write content or help you with that sort of stuff. Give me something, though, Ryan, that you're looking at that isn't like that is maybe a lot different that we haven't maybe heard of.
Yeah, so kind of the way I look at it, and I think this is the best way, because I think half of the reason why folks haven't fully adopted or integrated AI into what they're doing, I think half of it's mental and half of it's tactical, right? So like I'll address the mental part first, because if you can't get past that, you're not going to do the tactical. The most common things are, I'm too busy, I don't have the time, or I've tried it and it didn't work, or it's not right for me, or all these other excuses, right? All these basically, I don't want to say fake excuses, because they might be real at the time, but when you use those, those are kind of excuses, right? Let's just be honest with each other. They're excuses, and it's more so like it's not a value, it's more just not a priority. And so kind of the way that I look at it is like mentally, and this is a very, very simple example, tactical example of what you're talking about. There's micro productivity use cases. Some of those examples you mentioned are that. Another example would be meeting preparation, let's say, for example, right? There's a way, so if you were to do a really good job, let's say you're approaching a large opportunity and you have a meeting, it took you a long time to get an appointment, or you met them at an event, you spent a lot of time trying to get their attention. Finally, you got their attention and you have a meeting with them. It's with a C-level person and in multiple different opportunities. If you're in sales, you can make $100,000 in commission off this single opportunity. If you're a revenue leader, this could change the shape of the direction of your team. There's a lot of implications, right? So what will happen is companies will take, or individuals take, sometimes 30, 40 minutes to research those meetings and get prepared for them and truly understand them by looking at the letter from the CEO, right, of the annual report, by looking at the big risks in the 10K report, right? And then also looking at their website, looking at their client logos, all that. So that process might take 30 to 40 minutes, right? If you do it good. And what I'm finding is literally you could type in one prompt, and I have this in my Sales AI Accelerator, which will give you all that data for the company in literally like 30 seconds. So that's one micro example of productivity where you could take a half-hour task at maybe a competency level of 4 out of 5 and do it in 30 seconds and take it to a 5 out of 5, right? Now, that's one example from a time perspective. So when people say, I don't have time to do this, what if there is the opportunity where basically you do that 5 times a week? Basically, that's, whatever, or 6 times a week, let's say, that's 3 hours you just got back. So literally, if it takes you 3 hours to really learn it and understand it, you're free rolling after that first week. And that's just one use case. That's not even everything else identified, right? So there's examples like that. Then there's examples of bigger tasks, right? Or more lawn productivity tasks. And that could be in the essence of like a project. And so like if you're a revenue leader, one of the things, I literally just created a YouTube video on this yesterday that's getting released, I think today when we're recording this, but it's how to build a sales org in 20 minutes, right? And, that would have taken 8 hours to do all the work before. And what we're talking about is basically backing into a comp plan designed on a certain amount of people with deal sizes and KPIs, creating KPIs for understanding how to evaluate them, creating a management operating system in terms of monthly, weekly, quarterly, annual, right? On top of it too, creating a tech stack for a certain amount of budget, creating a job description, and doing all that in like maybe 10 minutes, right? Like that's the wild thing. To do it in the past, that would have taken hours, maybe a half day, 8 hours. And those are just two small examples that you could leverage when it comes to it. But like usually what will happen is most companies will be like, hey, I'm interested in this, like revenue leaders. Like for example, I sat with the CRO of a $250 million company the other day. And I started showing him this. I'm like, this is how it'll benefit your team, if you enable Bit, right? This is how it'll benefit leadership. And his mind was blown because he's like, this could change everything for our team. Like we could scale without adding people or without making any outside investments, limited investments in terms of like training and development on how to use it. But that's it, man. So it's pretty wild.
That is pretty wild. Holy cow. So building a sales team and the whole thing in 20 minutes, man, that's a day, a week-long process, bro. So talk to me a little bit about like what kind of inputs do you have to put in order to understand that stuff? Because it's not as simple as putting in the chat GPT, create a sales team for me, right? So talk to me about some of the stuff that you put in there, Ryan.
Yeah. So what I would say is like, I have effectively what I've created is a prompt matrix. And so I'm helping organizations set this up, which is effectively like a prompt library on steroids, right? So what it does is it enables you to execute very complex prompts by typing in one word. So not only do you have the benefit of amazing outputs, but you're not needing to type 4 sentences out every time. It's organized. You could innovate on top of it. So basically, it's like an AI innovation hub for an organization. So effectively, what I do, or for the prompts in that exact situation, is I think first of all, you got to have it nailed with like what's the context of who you are, what you sell, and what your offer is, right? And if you leverage a prompt matrix like what I have in my Sales AI Accelerator, or like what I help companies set up, is like literally that's a one-word execution to put that in anywhere, or you can put it in custom instructions in terms of ChatGPT. So custom instructions is basically like a model memory so that it knows who you are and what you do. So every single time you don't have to retell it that, right? So that's step one. And then step two is what I would say is I was very prescriptive in terms of like what exactly I was looking for. So for the first step, I identified, okay, this is the revenue outcome I want. I want a $2.5 million budget. I want 85% of my team to hit their quota at least, right? So we have good retention. And I want them to hit 125% as a team overall, right? So I set all these parameters up, and then I said our average deal size is X, and the time to close it is Y, right? So it's very specific in terms of the metrics and the KPI. And then I was asking it, what basically I needed from the output of those variables. And so that's a little bit of more of a complex example. But the cool thing is once you get that foundation, it gets really easy from there to just iterate on top of it. So the second one was like, okay, awesome. I need a monthly, or I need to understand what would be an ideal KPI structure to evaluate these people on based on the goals that I have above, right? List those out in monthly, quarterly, and annual. And do it in a chart form, like a tabular format, right? So it created out in a table, right? And then basically it gets simpler. So if you have a really good foundation, you can give a really good chain of thought prompting structure where it's easy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to your point, those are all things that I think revenue leaders know, but they don't know that they know, right? They have all those things. They don't know how to use the tool. and they don't do that. So how did you learn this, Ryan? How did you just trial and error? Are there courses that you took? Do you have a course that can teach them other than your prompt matrix that can help them?
Yeah. So kind of so to start with like how I learned it. So it was in November of 22 or October of 22. I actually got introduced. I have a podcast as well called The Scale Up Show. And I interview tech founders on there. And there was a tech founder who's about a $50 million company named Wistia. And the CEO, Chris Savage, is like, hey, Ryan, have you ever looked at Dolly? Have you heard of Dolly? And I'm like, no, what's Dolly? Right. Like this was like right when it came out. So I played with it at home with my kids in the weekend because basically it was the text to image generator, but it was like the first version. So it wasn't very good. It was kind of cool, but like, nothing special. Right. And so then what happened from there is I got put on the radar of ChatGPT and the beta list for that, the release of when ChatGPT came out. So I started using it almost immediately and seeing like what this was about, because there's a lot of preliminary information I saw that this was going to be a game changer just from different talks and information that I saw. So what I did from there is I'm like, all right, screw it. I'm going to test this on something that I know to be true, right? Like I knew to be true from like 10,000 hours of customer meetings and sitting there and listening to how CIOs and CTOs and C-level executives of Fortune 1000 companies interacted, right? So I'm like, I'm going to test it on this to see how good this thing is. Like, is this good or is this just bullshit? Like, kind of like Dolly was, at least at first. It wasn't really bullshit. It was just so-so. So anyways, I tried it out. And what happened was I asked it a question on something I knew to be true in terms of like how C-level executives were evaluated, what are the challenges they experience and how do they emotionally feel from that, right? So I asked it that kind of chain of thought. And the thing that was both like scared me down to my core, but then also excited me at the same time was it got close to like 95% of the way there the first time I tried it. And
Wow.
so like, I remember Phil like sitting and talking to my wife and I'm like, this is really scary, like how good this is. And this is going to change everything with the way that work is done, not just for revenue, but for anything else. Right. And I'm like, I gotta think about how I'm going to approach this. Right. Cause I was kind of like scared and excited at the same time. And so I sat and I talked with her because I'm like, I think a lot of people are going to get laid off from it. Like most people are ignoring that, but a lot of people will get displaced potentially. There's going to be new opportunities as well. And so I'm like, all right, I can't run away from it, right? I can't bury my head and run away from it because I'm going to get run over by it, right? Mike. So then I'm like, I got to run towards it. I'm like, I got to figure it out. I got to learn it. And so basically, I read a lot of information on it, but I looked at different use cases outside of business and then took all my domain expertise. I'm like, I'm going to apply that structure to this. I'm going to do this to that. And so what happened is I've already created over 100 use cases to use it for a revenue organization. I do have a training, basically a membership site on this. And I mean, it's very economical for anybody who could do it. It might even be below an expense threshold. And effectively what it does is it gives you like a prompt library. It gives you training on how to do this. And by effectively taking the success path, you will be better than 99% of people. Within 4 hours of taking it, can easily get back 10 to 20 hours a week while leveling yourself up. And so that's what I've done. And it's growing steadily. I've had a lot of companies reach out for me, wanting me to do consulting and help them as well and implement this at scale to teams. So those are kind of the areas in way I'm serving people and kind of how I'm doing it.
That's fantastic. Saving people that much time and reskilling them so that they're going to be less chance of being displaced, I think is fantastic. Before I ask you some more questions about AI, I've got to ask you, because I've been looking at that picture behind you there from Tommy Boy. So who do you identify with Tommy or with David Spade? Who's your guy?
Yeah, you know what, man? I think I think a younger Ryan, young Ryan probably identified more with Chris Farley in the way that I had reckless abandonment with execution. And I think as I've gotten older, like there's massive value to that. However, I think sometimes like Richard, which is David Spade, right? It makes sense to take a step back and do things the right way. So I like Chris Farley's aggression in terms of making things happen. And I love David Spade's like measured approach to making sure things are right. As a founder, you got to do both, right? You can't do one or the other. Otherwise you will have a an ambulance lit on fire on your desk where you've seen the picture behind me, man.
That's right. Exactly. I love that. That's cool. So awesome. So you talked about kind of what do you think is next, Ryan? I mean, you seem to have a good handle on what's happening now. Do you have any predictions for 24 and beyond that can help folks maybe jump ahead and instead of staying behind?
Yeah. So, well, I'll tell you where the puck is going, so you could skate to that instead of where it is, right? So I think like step one, this is what's happening. So recently, the GPT store was released by OpenAI, and so basically enabled people to have the ability to create what are called GPTs, which are micro use cases specifically on their platform, right? They've made it so that you don't need to understand development to do it. It's basically just natural language and then interacting with the tool to get the results that you want. So I think that's where we're at right now. What's happening is, Google is releasing their model, which is what I've seen preliminarily. It's going to be way better than Bard is before. And so what's going to happen is there's going to be a battle of the large language models, which is like ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, as well as Bard. And then even Claude is the other one. And then there's going to be all these open source LLMs, right? Which are basically models that are built off of them that are open source, that are not attached to a big company, right? So you have big tech, and then you have the open source model. And so what I think is going to happen with it is this is going to mature in the workspace because there's massive demand for employers that want their team upskill, but at the same time, there's massive demand from employees wanting to learn how to use this. So I think there's going to be a really, really unique opportunity in time where you could catapult people that have 10 years plus experience on you just by learning this and be really, really freaking good at it. So what's going to happen is if you look at the way the arc is going is right now, everybody's still working in kind of the prompt foundation mode where the chatbots effectively work where you send them a message and it gives you a response, or you answer a question and it gives you a response. What these companies are doing and why they're racing for this is the number one thing that they want is data, right? So they want to see how people are using this. And then what they're going to do is really, truly understand and basically take that data that they have and create the next level, which is called agents. So what agents are basically, think of it as kind of what I mentioned with GPTs. So think of it as prompting's foundational. GPTs are like micro work examples. Agents think of micro work examples that could operate without you telling them every step to do, right? And then the next level up is going to be autonomous organizations. So you'll have different groups and departments of these basically AI bots operating for you, and you're identifying outcomes that will do the work and come back to you, right? So I think that's the arc of where things are heading. That's not going to all happen this year because if all these agents were released in the world, I think from what I've heard from people at OpenAI through other resources I know, the internet will melt because we don't have the infrastructure capable to support all that action. And so I think what's going to happen is you're going to see the cost of SaaS continue to go down. You're going to see a lot of opportunities leveraging this within organizations. And like this year, I think agents are going to start to flourish. Like what I talked about, they've been available since last year, but they're not very good. In some cases, in most use cases, right, they need some work. The other thing that I see making a giant leap forward is video. Text to video. Last year was text to graphics, which made a huge jump by the end of the year versus the beginning of the year. I think the same thing's going to happen there. And then companies are going to start having, by default, chief AI officers everywhere within their organization so they can bridge the gap between the technical, the business use cases, and the outcomes that they want. So new roles are going to be created there. And what I see happening is like what you've seen with IBM, where, they're like, hey, we're going to need 8,000 less jobs over the next 3 years because of AI. And there's going to be a lot of other organizations that are following suit on that, right? So there's going to be less workers needed to get the same job done. And so it's going to create pressure to either upskill or be AI enabled or get kind of left behind and basically switch your profession. And so that's what I see happening. On the positive side, I think we'll be able to do as a human species, like things that we've never even dreamed of because of how fast and how sharp these systems are getting. And we're going to be able to do things that you can't even imagine. And that's going to happen within like 3 years. So I think you'll start to see glimpses of it this year, especially when it comes to AGI, which is basically AI that has general intelligence as well. So
that's incredible. Fantastic. Well, lots of changes coming. The good news is that there will be opportunity for folks that are willing to upskill, that are willing to embrace AI, that are willing to do that. Those that don't, sadly, will likely be left in the dust. So you mentioned, lots of stuff today. If people want to get started, Ryan, getting smarter about AI, do you have a beginner course, or do you have something that people can take or to point them to that they can get started on the AI journey for sales enablement?
yes, it's a great question, Phil. So here's what I would say is I'm in the process of building that out. That's on my roadmap to do, of creating just like a free intro course. And I do web trainings usually once a month to bring that to fruition, right? To have that kind of like intro model. So that's one thing. I always broadcast them on LinkedIn and my email list. The other thing too is like literally, and if you're cool, we could share it in the show notes, but basically that Sales AI Accelerator that I mentioned is like, I give people a free trial for 15 days, right? And with that free trial, they get 9 free AI resources where they have workflows, use cases, prompt examples, all those. Like literally you could trial it and just see and get tons of free resources and information. And that'll get you totally, upskilled fast. And then if you like it, continue the membership and the community. If not, that's cool too. But those are really, really simple ways to get started.
Simple, super stuff. So what's the URL for that, Ryan, so that we can direct people to that?
Yeah, so it is AI for revenue, and then there's an extension on it. So I'll send it to you.
Okay.
It's in my, basically it's on my website, ryanstaley.io. It's on my LinkedIn profile. So there's areas to do it, but I will give you the exact link because it's got some additional details on it.
Awesome. Sounds great. So get to know Ryan Staley, friends. If you're looking at AI for revenue enablement, Ryan is your guy. Lots of great stuff there. He's offering us a 15-day trial of his Sales AI Accelerator that's got lots of great stuff there. And get started on AI. If you've been pausing and thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to go away, or oh boy, I don't know what to do, just get started, friends. Get started on the journey and you can make a difference. Thanks so much, Ryan. This was great.